This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's, and for Archie's as well, because I could see where this was headed.
For the longest time, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have existed in a constant state of controversy, clashing with the public, their in-laws, and even their own families. But in 2026, the drama crossed a dangerous line. The couple is now at the center of a fresh firestorm after the palace released DNA proof connected to Archie Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor, reigniting long whispered doubts about Meghan's pregnancies. So what did the palace reveal, and how do Harry and Meghan survive this? Let's get into it. Buckingham Palace's revelation. Archie and Lilibet are growing up fast. One minute they are toddlers hidden from cameras. The next, they are school-aged children whose names alone spark debate. But their childhood has never been ordinary, and it has never been peaceful. From the moment they entered the world, controversy followed closely behind them, not because of anything they did, but because of the questions that surrounded their arrival. For years, the palace did what it always does when things get uncomfortable. It stayed silent. No clarifications, no denials, no confirmations. Silence was the shield. But in 2026, that silence finally broke. And when it didn't break gently. Buckingham Palace released documentation tied directly to Archie and Lilibet. Not vague statements, not carefully worded briefings, actual DNA-related proof. The kind of evidence that doesn't just stir conversation, but detonates it. Overnight, long whispered doubts about Meghan Markle and her pregnancies were dragged back into the open, only this time with official weight behind them. The timing alone raised eyebrows. Why now? Why revisit something the palace had spent years refusing to touch? And why risk placing two young children at the center of a storm that could change their futures entirely? Keep watching to find out. But to understand how the situation reached this point, you have to rewind. Back to 2019. Back to Meghan's first pregnancy. That was when the speculation began. The speculation began quiet at first. Then it became persistent. Then unavoidable. By the time Meghan was pregnant with her second child, the rumors were no longer fringe theories. They had become a running undercurrent, fueled by inconsistencies, unusual timelines, and unanswered questions that never quite went away. Officially, Meghan and Prince Harry are the parents of two children, Archie, now 6, and Lilibet, 4. Both hold royal titles. Both sit 6th and 7th in line to the throne. But beneath that official narrative sat a dangerous implication. Under royal rules, an heir must be born of the body of a titled royal mother. If that condition is not met, inheritance and succession are no longer guaranteed. That reality is exactly what made online speculations explosive. By early 2025, reports resurfaced online claiming both Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogacy. The claims didn't rely on one single moment. They drew from a pattern of secrecy surrounding the births, a pattern of timelines that didn't quite align, a pattern that the palace never attempted to correct. The first major problem came with Archie's birth. According to official records, he was born on May 6, 2019, at Portland Hospital in London, miles away from Frogmore Cottage, where a home birth had initially been expected. Then came the detail that stopped people cold. In Harry's own memoir, it was stated that within 2 hours of Archie's birth, the couple was already back at Frogmore. For many, that simply didn't make sense. Childbirth doesn't work on fast forward. Recovery alone usually takes longer than that. The confusion deepened when the palace announced Meghan was in labor several hours after Archie had already been born. The sequence of events felt scrambled, and once people noticed it, they couldn't unsee it. Then there was the public debut. While other senior royals presented their newborns almost immediately, Archie was kept from view for more than 2 days. Later, reports surfaced that his birth certificate had been amended days after his birth, altering how Meghan was listed. Small changes on paper, but in royal matters, paper trails matter. Lilibet's birth added even more fire. She was born in California after Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties and relocated to Montecito. By then, trust between the Sussexes and the palace was already fragile. Every decision was scrutinized. Every silence felt intentional, and the lack of clarity only hardened suspicion. For months, the accusations hung in the air unanswered. Then, in mid-2025, Meghan appeared to respond. On June 4th, she shared a video on Instagram. The setting was a hospital room. The mood was playful. She and Harry danced together, and Meghan wore a visibly prominent baby bump. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. This was meant to be proof. A quiet way of saying the rumors of surrogacy were baseless. But instead of ending the speculation, that one video reignited it. Critics questioned the appearance of the bump, its position, its shape, the ease with which she moved. Rather than calming the storm, the video became another piece of evidence people argued over, dissecting every frame and every movement. And so, despite years passing and moments meant to clarify the truth, the questions never fully died. Which brings everything back to now. The palace did not release DNA-linked proof casually. Institutions built on tradition and restraint do not act without reason. Whatever forced this decision was serious enough to override decades of silence. And whatever the documentation contains, it now hangs over Archie and Lilibet's future like a shadow. Because this is no longer just about rumors or public opinion. It's about legitimacy. It's about succession. And it's about two children whose place within one of the most powerful institutions in the world may now depend on answers that can no longer be avoided. And that context matters. Because this reckoning didn't appear out of nowhere. It traces back to a moment when Harry and Meghan made a choice that permanently altered their relationship with the institution, asking the questions now. When Meghan and Harry made the decision to walk away. Ever since Harry and Meghan walked away from royal duties, trouble hasn't just followed them. It's trailed them closely, step for step, like a shadow that refuses to fall behind. Their exit from royal life wasn't quiet, and it wasn't gradual. It was abrupt. One moment, they were senior working royals. The next, they were gone. In 2020, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle shut the door on the monarchy and crossed the Atlantic. The public-facing explanation leaned heavily on mental health, media pressure, and the need for peace. But behind palace walls, a far less sentimental motive was taking shape: money. According to royal insiders, the couple didn't just want space. They wanted freedom. Freedom to earn. Freedom to choose their projects. Freedom to step outside the rigid boundaries that had governed royal life for generations. Royal author Valentine Lowe, in his book Courtiers, paints a picture of a couple already halfway out the door long before the public announcement. From his account, bridges weren't just burned. They were deliberately dismantled, and the reason was quite simple. Meghan wanted the freedom to make money for herself, and that desire became the final push that made staying impossible. Behind the scenes, multiple scenarios were explored. One proposal involved working royals part-time, carving out a month each year to pursue personal ventures. Another idea floated the possibility of living mostly private lives while appearing only occasionally for royal engagements. On paper, it sounded like a compromise. In reality, it collided headfirst with royal protocol. Any version of public-facing royal life came with rules: no commercial deals, no personal branding, no decisions made for financial gain. Normal royal behavior, as the palace framed it. And that was the deal-breaker. From the palace's perspective, the line was clear. Working royals do not monetize their status. They do not act independently. They do not blur public service with personal profit. From Meghan's perspective, those restrictions made the role suffocating and limiting, especially for someone who had already built a career before marrying into the institution. Lowe's account suggests that once the couple realized there was no way to earn freely, while remaining inside the system, the choice became inevitable. Leaving wasn't just an option, it was the only path forward. But money wasn't the only friction point. Lowe also claims the Sussexes wanted the freedom to engage with American politics, something that is strictly off-limits for working members of the royal family. That desire, according to palace insiders, triggered serious alarm. Political neutrality is not a preference in the monarchy. It's a rule. Breaking it would have risked dragging the crown into partisan territory, something the institution has spent centuries avoiding. Behind closed doors, there was no middle ground. Either the Sussexes accepted the restrictions that came with royal duty, or they walked away entirely. In the end, the decision came from the very top. Queen Elizabeth II took the position that without full adherence to royal limitations, Harry and Meghan could not continue as working royals. No half in, half out. No special arrangement. And just like that, it was over. Once settled in the United States, the Sussexes moved quickly. Financial independence wasn't a distant goal. It was immediate. Within months, they began building an entirely new public identity, one rooted not in royal duty, but in media, influence, and brand power. Their connections in America grew just as fast. Though neither Harry nor Meghan formally entered politics, their proximity to it became increasingly visible. Collaborations tied to the Invictus Games brought them into contact with prominent political families. Public support during the 2020 election cycle placed them squarely within the American political conversation, whether they intended it or not. Speculation around Meghan's political ambitions intensified after reports surfaced of close ties with Valerie Biden Owens. In 2023, Biden Owens reportedly spoke favorably about Meghan as someone she would support at the highest level of leadership. Meghan herself never confirmed any political plans. But the rumor mill didn't need confirmation to keep spinning. Financially, the Sussexes wasted no time turning independence into income. In 2020, they signed a reported $100 million deal with Netflix, launching a slate of projects that firmly positioned them as media power players rather than exiled royals. Since then, Meghan has expanded her footprint even further, rolling out new ventures that include a lifestyle brand, a revamped podcast, and a digital storefront designed to capitalize on her global visibility. Harry and Meghan didn't just leave the monarchy. They rejected its limits. What followed wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was the consequence of choosing autonomy over tradition, profit over protocol, and reinvention over inheritance. And that choice didn't just reshape their future. It reframed their past. Because the scrutiny Meghan faces today didn't begin in California. It didn't even begin with Megxit. It began years earlier, inside the very institution she would later walk away from. Times, Meghan Markle has been embroiled in controversies. From fashion choices to public behavior, Meghan has always known how to keep people talking. And long before the lawsuits, the documentaries, or the exit from royal life, the pattern was already there. This didn't begin after she left the monarchy. It began while she was still inside it. The first real rupture came in 2017, before her engagement to Prince Harry was even official. Meghan gave an interview to Vanity Fair and did something royal. Girlfriends almost never do. She spoke openly about her relationship. She confirmed they were in love. No coy deflection. No private matter phrasing. Just a clear, public acknowledgement. For anyone familiar with the royal culture, it was jarring. Royals do not comment on romance before formal announcements. They let the palace speak for them. Meghan didn't. And in that single moment, she signaled something important. She was not interested in disappearing into silence. Her relationship with the press would be direct, personal, and often at odds with the Crown's tightly controlled messaging. Then came the small moments that didn't feel small at all. In 2018, during a royal outing, Meghan was seen stepping into a vehicle ahead of Queen Elizabeth II. Protocol is rigid on this point. No one moves before the monarch, ever. Whether it was nerves, confusion, or a genuine misstep, the reaction was immediate. Headlines exploded. Royal watchers dissected the footage frame by frame. Some called it a glaring breach of decorum. Others waved it off as a rookie mistake. But the narrative stuck. Meghan didn't seem to fit easily into the choreography of royal life. Public appearances only deepened that perception. British royal couples are expected to maintain a composed distance during engagements. No overt affection, no hand-holding, no lingering touches. Meghan and Harry didn't play by that rule. They held hands. They leaned into each other. They exchanged glances that read as intimate and unguarded. To many observers, it looked natural, human, loving. To critics, it looked like yet another refusal to conform, especially when placed beside the reserved posture of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Over time, the conversation shifted to character. Public appearances only deepened that perception. British royal couples are expected to maintain a composed distance during engagements. No overt affection, no hand-holding, no lingering touches. Meghan and Harry didn't follow that script. They held hands. They leaned into each other. They exchanged glances that felt intimate and unguarded. To many observers, it looked natural, human, loving. To critics, it looked like yet another refusal to conform, especially when set against the reserved posture of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Gradually, the conversation shifted. This was no longer just about protocol. It became about character. Then former colleagues began to speak. Behind the scenes, a harsher picture started to emerge. One former media staffer described working with Meghan as emotionally painful, claiming the atmosphere could turn cold without warning if something went wrong. The account framed her as someone intensely aware of power dynamics, always conscious of who was in favor and who could be quietly pushed aside. The stories followed a similar pattern. Meghan could be warm and enthusiastic at the beginning of a working relationship, but that warmth allegedly evaporated when expectations weren't met, particularly on projects involving Harry as well. One frequently cited example involved the rollout of her podcast, Archetypes. A teaser was released months before the show itself, leaving staff with little material to sustain momentum. Frustration reportedly followed. By June 2023, the Spotify deal was dissolved altogether. Other staffers described a subtler strain, not public blow-ups, but private criticism, conversations held behind closed doors, a slow erosion of confidence that felt personal rather than professional. One comparison likened the experience to teenage mean girl dynamics rather than a collaborative workplace. But that wasn't the only version of Meghan that surfaced. Producer Jane Marie, who worked with the Sussexes on audio projects, rejected the negative portrayals outright, describing Meghan as genuinely kind and pleasant to work with. The contrast was stark, and the divide in experiences impossible to ignore. This tension wasn't new. Meghan had faced accusations of bullying palace staff for years, including reports that branded her a dictator in high heels who reduced grown men to tears. Other accounts portrayed her as dismissive of advice and difficult to manage, while casting Harry as charming but enabling, someone who smoothed over conflicts rather than stopping them. Even those criticisms, however, came with caveats. Some former aides acknowledged that everything changed after Megxit. According to them, Meghan's worst moments were magnified, distorted, and amplified by lingering resentment after the couple's exit from royal life. Difficult royals, they noted, had existed for centuries. Meghan simply became the easiest target. In October 2022, Meghan addressed the narrative directly. On archetypes, she spoke about being labeled difficult and linked it to the angry black woman stereotype. She framed boundary setting as clarity, not cruelty, insisting that being direct did not make someone demanding. Harry echoed that defense in his memoir Spare. He described Meghan as an exemplary boss, someone who checked on ill staff, sent food and flowers, and made personal efforts to support people when they were struggling. And that is where the Meghan Markle story changes. Every moment has two versions. To some, she is confident, modern, and unwilling to shrink herself to fit tradition. To others, she is controlling, difficult, and intolerant of dissent. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. But the consequences of that divide are no longer confined to Meghan herself. They've landed on Harry, and ultimately, on two children who never asked to be part of any of it. Where does all this leave Archie and Lilibet? Even with Harry and Meghan stripped of their HRH status, the story doesn't necessarily end there. In fact, for Archie and Lilibet, it may just be entering a far more complicated chapter. When Queen Elizabeth II died, the rules of the game changed overnight. With a new monarch comes a quiet reshuffling of rank, and suddenly, Harry and Meghan's children moved up the ladder without lifting a finger. They were no longer great-grandchildren of the sovereign. They became grandchildren of the king. And under long-standing royal convention, that shift matters. By tradition, the grandchildren of the reigning monarch are entitled to be styled as prince and princess, not by popularity, not by approval, by law. Which means that, technically, Archie and Lilibet should now be Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, unless King Charles III decides otherwise. Meghan has long suggested that her children's titles were never guaranteed, even before Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal life. During her explosive interview with Oprah Winfrey, she revealed that conversations had taken place behind palace doors about altering the rules altogether, specifically to prevent Archie from becoming a prince. According to Meghan, these discussions happened while she was still pregnant with her first child. She framed the issue as deeply personal and deeply unsettling, claiming concerns were raised about how dark her baby's skin might be and what that would mean within the institution. In that interview, Meghan explained that even the convention governing titles was suddenly treated as flexible when it came to her son. From her perspective, the rules weren't just being bent, they were being rewritten. The legal framework itself goes back more than a century. In 1917, King George V issued protocols stating that the children and grandchildren of the reigning monarch are entitled to royal titles, while great-grandchildren are not. That's why, at birth, Archie and Lilibet were styled without prince or princess designations. At the time, it followed the rule book exactly. But the moment Charles ascended the throne, that justification disappeared. Now Archie and Lilibet sit as grandchildren of the monarch, and under the existing framework, the titles are theirs by default. No ceremony required, no announcement needed. They simply become eligible. Still, nothing about this family is ever that straightforward. Charles has made it clear, at least in principle, that he wants a slimmed-down monarchy, fewer working royals, less sprawl, more focus on the direct line. While he hasn't publicly spelled out how far he plans to take that vision, the implication is obvious. Not everyone gets to stay in the spotlight, and not everyone gets to keep everything they're entitled to. If Charles wanted to stop Archie from becoming a prince and Lilibet from becoming a princess, he would have to take a deliberate step. He would need to issue a letters patent, a formal, legal document that overrides convention and redraws the boundaries. It's not something done lightly, and once issued it sends a message that's impossible to soften. For now, no such document has been announced. As things stand, Archie and Lilibet remain 6th and 7th in line to the throne. Ahead of them sits their uncle, Prince William, followed by his 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and then their father, Harry. From a distance, it looks orderly, predictable, but beneath the surface, it's anything but, because this isn't just about titles, it's about identity, belonging, and whether 2 children growing up thousands of miles away, in California, will be allowed to carry the symbols of a system their parents walked away from. For Archie and Lilibet, the door isn't fully closed. Not yet. Tradition is technically on their side. But tradition only holds until a king decides it doesn't. And in a monarchy trying to redefine itself, that decision could come at any moment. Which raises the next, unavoidable question. Is a family reconciliation possible? When it comes to reconciliation, the question around Prince Harry isn't whether time will heal old wounds. It's whether there's anything left to heal at all. 5 years after walking away from royal life, Prince Harry remains fundamentally disconnected from his family. Not quietly distant, not temporarily estranged, fully removed. Despite public concern around his father's health, experts say the emotional gap between Harry and the House of Windsor has only widened, hardened by mistrust, resentment, and a history that keeps replaying itself in public. Since the couple's 2020 exit, Harry's relationship with King Charles III has been reduced to brief, functional contact at best. Even their short reunion last September, following Charles's cancer diagnosis, failed to signal any real thaw. Royal observers have described that meeting as driven by obligation rather than affection, a moment rooted in constitutional duty and basic paternal decency, not a genuine attempt to rebuild what was lost. According to royal insiders, that distinction matters a lot. From their perspective, Harry didn't just leave the family, he exposed it. Interviews, documentaries, and eventually his 2023 memoir, Spare, pull deeply personal moments into the public arena, turning private grievances into permanent records. Trust, once broken at that level, is not easily repaired. And in royal households, trust isn't emotional currency, it's structural. That fracture extends beyond the king. Harry is reportedly no longer in contact with Prince William or Kate Middleton, effectively cutting himself off from the core of the future monarchy. Suggestions that communication is ongoing have been dismissed outright by London-based sources as laughable. Christmas was once again spent apart. Silence has become the norm, not the exception. From the monarchy's standpoint, preserving stability and safeguarding the institution's future outweigh any personal reconciliation. Emotional repair requires discretion, restraint, and time. Harry chose exposure instead. And once that line was crossed, the balance shifted permanently. Only after understanding Harry's estrangement does Meghan's situation come into focus. Because while the dynamics differ, the outcome looks eerily similar. On Meghan's side, experts are even more definitive. The relationship with Thomas Markle is widely viewed as irreparable. Years of public fallout, media involvement, and failed communication attempts have left nothing solid to return to. Even his recent left leg amputation, a moment that might soften most family divides, has not changed the assessment. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams has described the situation as beyond recovery, pointing to a long pattern of turmoil that never found resolution. From that perspective, Meghan's reported reluctance to re-engage, including an unconfirmed letter believed to have been sent privately, signals not indecision but finality. The breakdown traces back to the months leading up to Meghan's wedding, when staged paparazzi photos triggered a collapse in trust between father and daughter. What followed was not one dramatic argument, but a slow and painful disengagement. Attempts to reconnect reportedly failed. Messages went unanswered. Silence replaced conversation. And over time, distance became protection. Recent developments only complicated matters further. Despite Thomas expressing that he did not want to die estranged from his daughter, reports suggest communication efforts during his health crisis were strained and unsuccessful. Meghan reportedly tried to reach him through calls and emails, even contacting multiple hospitals in an effort to locate him. None of it led to contact. Compounding the tension, Thomas has never met Meghan's children. No photos have been shared. No introductions were made. Reports that he first disclosed his condition to the press rather than privately to his daughter reinforce the very behavior Meghan has long found impossible to navigate. Royal expert Hilary Fordwich has framed the situation as emotionally immovable, particularly given the timing and scale of the rifts involved. From her view, genuine peace is unlikely on either side, not because of a lack of opportunity, but because the damage runs too deep. Family relationships, she has suggested, remain fragile at best. That sentiment is echoed by Kinsey Schofield, who has questioned whether Meghan has any real interest in repairing her relationship with her father at this stage. Similar doubts have been raised about Harry's willingness to reconcile with his own family, especially as his public appearances continue to reinforce distance rather than reconciliation. In response to the growing speculation, a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex has dismissed the coverage as entirely speculative, stressing that the couple will not comment publicly on private family matters. But for many observers, the silence says as much as any statement ever could. At this point, the pattern is clear. Illness has not softened the divide. Time has not closed the gap. And public confessions have not brought understanding. What remains are relationships reshaped by exposure, resentment, and choices that can't be undone. For Harry and Meghan, reconciliation isn't being delayed. According to those watching closest, it may already be behind them. Do you think the royals will ever find a way to move past the betrayal and welcome back Meghan and Harry into the fold? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen.